If I were to ask you whether you think we live in a moral society, I bet your answer would be a resounding no. The internet gives us a window into the lives of others across the globe, and what we see is often repulsive. It seems as though we don't really know what we're doing. We have no guiding star to look to show us how and why we should be moral. We can't seem to agree on what the moral thing to do is, and as a result, there's mass political divisions in our society, with each side believing the other to be morally evil. On the 21st of May, 2025, just 1 month ago, the philosopher Alasdair MacIntyre passed away. But what he left behind was a book that might explain and correct the moral deficiencies within our society. His book, After Virtue. MacIntyre starts with a story to help illustrate a general overview of the situation. Imagine that science caused some sort of catastrophe, and as a result, it was shunned and eliminated in society. Scientists were killed, labs were destroyed, and all scientific literature was banned. Only fragments remained in this new society. But after some years, there's a social revival in science using these fragments. People are starting to memorize scientific terms and phrases. However, they don't understand the context of it because it's long gone. You can fully recreate the periodic table by memory, but you can't explain what any of these letters mean. There's no actual science going on. MacIntyre sees the history of morality in our world the same way. We're currently living in a society where we have the language and appearance of morality. We could go on about right and wrong all we want, but we don't have the context, the substance of morality. We don't know what any of this means. There's so much moral disagreement today where it almost seems like some endless debate is going on. Consider these two arguments on abortion. Everyone has certain rights over his or her person, including his or her own body. It follows from the nature of these rights that at the stage where the embryo is essentially part of the mother's body, the mother has a right to make her own uncovered decision on whether she will have an abortion or not. Therefore, abortion is morally permissible and ought to be allowed by law. Now compare that argument with this one. Murder is wrong. Murder is the taking of innocent life. An embryo is an identifiable individual, differing from a newborn infant only in being at an early stage on the long road to adult capacities, and, if any life is innocent, that of an embryo. If infanticide is murder, as it is, abortion is murder. So abortion is not only morally wrong, but ought to be legally prohibited. When it comes to these arguments and many more, MacIntyre recognizes some shared commonalities. Firstly, both arguments are logically valid. The conclusions follow from the premises. However, we can't rationally weigh the premises against each other. In this example, we're weighing individual rights against the wrongness of murder. But despite this, the second characteristic of these moral disagreements is that they claim to be objective and impersonal. And thirdly, they detach themselves from historical context. We might be able to recognize Locke when talking about our rights, or Aquinas in our second argument, but their influence is coming from a certain historical and cultural context. So what happened? Why are we in this situation full of extreme moral disagreement and divide? MacIntyre hones in on a philosophy that emerged in the early 20th century known as Emotivism. Here's how he defines it. All evaluative judgments, and more specifically, all moral judgments, are nothing but expressions of preference, expressions of attitude or feeling, insofar as they are moral or evaluative in character. So when I say breaking into my car is wrong, that's just a feeling of mine. Now MacIntyre breaks down why emotivism is obviously wrong, but there are two important takeaways here. One, we could clearly see emotivism in our culture today, with our moral opinions being simply our emotions and feelings. Secondly, emotivism didn't just spring up randomly. MacIntyre traces it back through the history of ethical philosophy. Emotivism is in response to a philosophy called intuitionism, which in turn was in response to ethical philosophers coming out of the Enlightenment. So keep the Enlightenment in mind, because that seems to be the turning point for the mess we're in now. But before we go after the Enlightenment, let's look more specifically at our culture today and how emotivism influenced it. One important emotivist aspect of our culture is the lack of distinction between manipulative and non-manipulative relationships. And this is shown in what MacIntyre refers to as characters. Characters are essentially social roles that people take on, which in turn limit their morality essentially. If you take on a character, your morality is constrained to the morality of that character, like a cage. Characters also act as representatives of the morality of the culture they're in. Characters are the masks worn by moral philosophies. Now, the social role one plays doesn't have to always coincide with the individual taking on that role. MacIntyre uses the example of a Catholic priest performing ritualistic duties, but personally has lost his faith. But nonetheless, while taking on that character, the individual morality is constrained within that social role. Now, what specific characters have emerged in our culture as a result of emotivism? We have the aesthete, the manager, and the therapist. As we go through them, note the lack of concern for morality in each. The aesthete is a character concerned with boredom, brought on by a leisurely life. This leisurely life is often financially related. However, the aesthete doesn't necessarily have to be rich, but still might have rich fantasies and dreams. In order to fight this boredom and need for excitement and sensation, they may engage in manipulative relationships with others to feed that desire. Notice how there's not much talk of morality or virtue here. An example MacIntyre uses that we've talked about on this channel is Kierkegaard's character A from Either Or. Next we have the manager. The manager is involved in some organization, whether it be a private company or government or political group. The manager recognizes the goals of that group and tries to use scarce resources to meet those goals. Bureaucratic rationality is the rationality of matching means to ends economically and efficiently. Again, here we have no real mention of morality. The manager is simply concerned with meeting ends through means, regardless of what those ends are, and the manager might employ manipulative social relations in order to meet that goal. Finally, we have the therapist, who is very much like the manager, concerned with means and ends, but in personal affairs rather than organizational affairs. The therapist also treats ends as given, as outside his scope. His concern also is with technique, with effectiveness in transforming neurotic symptoms into directed energy, maladjusted individuals into well-adjusted ones. Neither the manager nor therapist, in their roles as manager and therapist, do or are able to engage in moral debate. So we have our characters in today's society, and you may recognize some of them yourselves. Again, note the disregard for morality and more specifically the lack of any distinction between manipulative and non-manipulative relationships employed to meet certain ends. And remember, what links them all together is the philosophical and cultural consequences of emotivism. Emotivism informs a great deal of contemporary moral utterance and practice, and more specifically, that of the central characters of modern society. With our outline of the moral problems facing moral society, as brought about by emotivism, MacIntyre's next step is to look back into the Enlightenment, see what went wrong, and from there we might find a solution to our problems. MacIntyre goes after a lot of Enlightenment-era moral philosophies, from Kierkegaard, who is responding to Kant, who is responding to Hume, and you get the point. Now MacIntyre goes in and explains why all of these people were wrong, but there is a central problem with all of their ethics, which led their projects to fail, and which inevitably led to emotivism, the lack of a teleological view of humanity. Essentially, teleology is all about goals and ends. What is the goal or end of something? A teleology of a person would imply that the person has some sort of end or goal or purpose to meet. These Enlightenment philosophers rejected this view that humans have a teleology or purpose. Now, why is that so important? Well, MacIntyre uses the example of a watch, which I found pretty effective. If I were to say, this watch is bad, you may take this as just a statement of opinion, perhaps an emotivist outburst. But if I were to say, this watch is bad because it isn't telling the time right, then we might consider it a factual statement. Why? Because we recognize the function of a watch is to be able to tell time, and when a watch is not fulfilling that function, we may factually call it a bad watch. But if we took the teleological view that humans have a purpose, if a human weren't meeting that purpose or function based on an action, we could then make a factual claim about that action. To call something good, therefore, is also to make a factual statement. To call a particular action just or right is to say that it is what a good man would do in such a situation. Hence, this type of statement too is factual. In sum, the problem of Enlightenment moral philosophy and emotivism is that it rejects the Aristotelean view that there is a teleological explanation for a human. That view that man has an essential nature or purpose. If we don't have a purpose, we can't factually say whether or not what we're doing is right or wrong, because there's nothing we can make reference to. It's the Enlightenment rejection of this view that led to the inevitable conclusion of emotivism. That emergence involved a rejection of all those Aristotelian and quasi-Aristotelian views of the world, in which evaluative claims function as a particular kind of factual claim. So that's MacIntyre's diagnosis of the problem. He's making appeals to Aristotle and these views on humans having an essential nature. In our next video on After Virtue, we're going to take a closer look at his solutions. Is he advocating for a return to Aristotelian virtue ethics? You'll just have to wait and find out. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. And with that, I wish you all a beautiful rest of your day.